Welcome back to Reformed Thinking. I am really glad you're here with us today.
It's good to be back.
We have a really fascinating setup for this deep dive. Usually when we crack open a classic work of theology or apologetics, we have a tendency to go straight for the big chapters.
The famous bits.
Yeah, the bold headings, the thesis statements, the parts that, get quoted on social media or printed on coffee mugs. We want the main event.
That's right. We look for the trilemma, Lord, liar, or lunatic. Sure. Or we go looking for the moral argument for God. We want the greatest hits.
Exactly. But today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to the back of the book. We're looking at the fine print. We're diving into Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, which is, you could argue it's the most read apologetic work of the 20th century.
Very easily.
But we aren't looking at the main text. We were focusing entirely on two short notes that he tacked on to the end of the section called Beyond Personality.
It sounds a bit like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, doesn't it? Tune in today for the footnotes.
It does, and I have to admit, when I first looked at the plan, I was a little skeptical. I thought, well, surely if it was important, Lewis would have put it in the main chapters, right? Why are we sneaking backstage to look at the addendums?
Because, and this is true for a lot of great thinkers, an author often puts their most rigorous, high-level thinking in the notes. This is where Lewis is anticipating the really hard objections.
Oh, okay.
The ones he knew the casual radio listener might not ask, but the deep thinker, the skeptic, absolutely would. In the main text, Lewis is sort of building a house for everyone to live in.
A very accessible house.
Exactly. But in these notes, he's showing you the blueprints for the foundation. He's explaining the structural engineering. He's answering the critics who actually wrote to him saying, hey, your architecture doesn't quite make sense.
So this is the director's cut of his theology, in a way.
In a way, yeah. These notes address specific criticisms he got after the original broadcasts. And in answering them, he offers some of his most startling, almost sci-fi speculations about the nature of God, the purpose of the physical universe, and the spiritual physics of humanity.
Spiritual physics. I like that. So we're looking at two specific problems today, then.
We are. The first one is a question of, efficiency and suffering. It asks a very blunt question. If God's whole goal was to have sons, children who are like him, why did he go through the painful, long, messy process of creating biological humans and then trying to convert them? Why not just create perfect sons from the start?
That's what he calls the toy soldier problem.
That's the one. And the second problem is about us. How should we view the human race? Are we just a collection of separate individuals like, marbles in a bag? Or are we something else entirely? And that leads us into a discussion on the devil's favorite strategy for social engineering.
Okay, so if I can frame the mission for this deep dive, we are hunting for those aha moments, those insights into the nature of God, the purpose of matter itself. Why do we even have bodies? And how to spot the enemy's traps in our daily politics and ethics.
It really connects everything, from the creation of the atom all the way down to how you treat your neighbor on the bus.
Let's dive in. I want to start with that first question Lewis tackles. He calls it the toy soldier problem. And you mentioned he got this from a critic who wrote to him basically saying, what? God seems like a bad manager.
That's a great way to put it. It's a fair challenge if you look at it from a purely human perspective of manufacturing. The critic asks, if God wanted sons, why create toy soldiers, which is Lewis's metaphor for natural biological humans, and then bring them to life through such a difficult, painful process?
Right.
The critic is saying, why build a tin soldier and then spend thousands of years trying to turn it into a real man? Why didn't you just start with the real man?
It does seem like taking the long way around, and a long way that's full of potholes and cancer and war and all kinds of suffering. If I were a factory manager and I wanted to make cars, I wouldn't build a bicycle first and then just painfully hammer it into the shape of a car. I just built the car.
That is the crux of the objection. Is God inefficient? And Lewis breaks his answer down into two parts. There's what he calls the easy part, and then there's the hard part. And I should probably warn you, when Lewis says hard, he means metaphysically hard.
Let's start with the easy part then. I'm guessing easy is a relative term here.
It is. The easy answer is that the process was never designed to be painful. The difficulty, the struggle, the suffering, that's not the manufacturing process God intended. That is the result of the human race turning away from God centuries ago.
So this is the classic doctrine of the fall. The pain isn't part of the design. The pain is the interference. It's the monkey wrench in the gears.
Precisely. Lewis argues that the turning of the tin soldier into a real man Wasn't meant to be a horrific struggle. It was meant to be a joyful transformation. But the tin soldiers, us, we rebelled. And this brings us right to the topic of free will.
Okay.
Lewis argues that God gave humanity free will because a world of mere automata robots, essentially, could never know infinite happiness or true love.
We've talked about this in other contexts, but I think it's good to stress test it again. Why is a robot incapable of love? I mean, if I program my computer to print "I love you" every morning and it does it faithfully, why isn't that love?
Because the computer had no choice. It could not have done otherwise.
Right.
Love, by its very definition, requires the option not to love. If you hold a gun to someone's head and say, "Marry me," well, the resulting marriage is not love, it's coercion. God decided that a world of free creatures, even with the inherent risk that they might rebel and break everything, that was worth more than a world of perfectly obedient, well-oiled machines.
So the critic's question assumes that the pain is God's inefficient method. But Lewis is saying no, the pain is what happens when the toy soldiers use their free will to march in the opposite direction of the commander.
That's it. The inefficiency is our fault, not the manufacturer's. So that's the easy part of the answer. It deals with the fall and the corruption of a good design. But then Lewis pivots. He says, okay, let's look deeper. The critic asked, why not just beget many sons at the outset?
And this is where we get into the hard answer. This is where we leave, the standard Sunday school curriculum and start walking into the philosophy department.
It is. Lewis points out a fundamental doctrine that all Orthodox Christians agree on. In the full and original sense, there is only one Son of God.
That's the capital S Son, the second person of the Trinity, Jesus Christ, the eternal Word.
Correct. Not a created being, but the begotten Word. Now, the critic is asking, could there have been many? Could God have just begotten, say, 1,000,000 Jesus figures from eternity past? Why only one?
It's a weird question when you say it out loud. Why didn't God clone Jesus 1,000,000 times before the universe began?
It is a weird question. And Lewis's response is fascinating because he doesn't just, quote a Bible verse. He attacks the very grammar of the question itself. He asks if the words could have been even make sense when we apply them to God.
Okay, this is a heavy lift, so let's take it slow. When we talk about things in our world, finite, created things, we can easily say, this could have been different.
Right. Let's use Lewis's example. He talks about a printer. He's in a person printing a book, not a machine. The letters on the page in front of you are black. But you could say they could have been red.
Sure, that makes perfect sense.
But why does it make sense? Why could they have been red?
Well, because the printer could have decided to use red ink instead of black ink.
And why would he have used red ink?
Maybe his boss told him to. Or maybe the shop was out of black ink that day. Or he just felt like a change.
Exactly. You can trace a chain of causes backwards. A finite thing. The black letter is the way it is because a previous thing, the choice of ink, was the way it was. If you change the cause, you can change the effect. And that's why potentiality, the idea that something could be otherwise, makes perfect sense for created things. Every fact in the universe is dependent on a previous fact.
But God is not a created thing.
And this is the massive distinction we so often miss. God is the uncreated creator. He is what theologians sometimes call the ens, the being who exists from himself. Lewis calls him the rock-bottom, irreducible fact.
Rock-bottom, irreducible fact. I like that. It feels very solid.
Yeah.
It implies there's nothing underneath him, nothing holding him up.
It's the most solid thing there is. There is no cause behind God. There's no factory that made God. Or we can go and ask, hey, Mr. Factory Foreman, why didn't you make God differently? Why didn't you give him 3 heads instead of making him a trinity? Why didn't you make him, green?
Because there is no foreman. He just is, the I am.
He is the source of all fact. He is the stopping point of all explanations. So asking, could God have been different? Or could God have done this differently in his eternal nature? It's just nonsensical. It's like asking, what is north of the North Pole?
Once you get to the North Pole, there is no more north. It's just south in every direction. Once you get to God, there is no more why.
It's a category error. You're treating the source of all facts as if it were just another fact that could be swapped out for a different one. God is what he is. And that's the end of the matter. So when the critic asks, why didn't God beget many sons from eternity? The first part of the hard answer is, we are bumping up against the very definition of God. God is not a buffet where you can pick and choose attributes.
So it's possible that the very nature of God, the logic of existence itself, means there can only be one begotten son. It's not a choice, it's a fact.
Lewis suggests we shouldn't be too quick to assume that anything is possible with God when it comes to logic. Nonsense remains nonsense even when we talk about God.
But Lewis doesn't even stop there. He goes even further into this idea of manyness. This is the part that, I'll be honest, it really made me sit up and just stare at the wall for a minute. He challenges us to think about what many even means.
It's a profound mental exercise.
Yeah.
It's very simple, but it's very deep. Lewis asks us to try and imagine the Father begetting many sons from eternity. Forget the theology for a second, just try to picture it logically. If there were many, how would they be different from one another?
Right. To have many of something, to have a plural, you need to be able to tell them apart. You need to be able to say, this is son A and over there is son B.
Lewis uses this brilliant analogy of pennies. Imagine you have two pennies. They're both made of copper, they're both round, they both have the same image of Lincoln stamped on them. Let's say they're chemically identical, down to the last atom. Why are they two pennies and not just one?
Well, because they're in different places. One is here on the table and the other is, I don't know, in my pocket.
Okay, so space differentiates them. What else?
Or I guess they're made of different atoms. This specific cluster of copper atoms is here, and that other cluster of copper atoms is there.
Exactly. To differentiate two identical things, you usually need space and matter. You need a medium, what Lewis calls nature, to separate them.
Yeah.
You need to be able to say, this one is at coordinate A, and that one is at coordinate B.
So if we try to apply this to God, we know the Father and the Son are distinct, but how? They aren't in different places because God doesn't have a body and doesn't exist in space.
They're distinct by relation. The Father begets, the Son is begotten. That is a relational difference. It's like the difference between a speaker and the word that is spoken. They are part of one event, but the speaker is the source and the word is the result. It doesn't require space or time to exist. It's an internal relationship within the Godhead.
But if you try to introduce a third son, or a million sons,
Now you've got a problem. If you have a million sons, they all have the exact same relation to the Father. They're all begotten. And they all have the same relation to each other. They're all siblings. Without space to stand in or bodies to make them distinct. What makes son number 4 different from son number 99?
there's no basis for distinction. They would just collapse into one, the begotten.
Unless you introduce a medium to separate them. Unless you create a universe of space and time where they can stand apart from each other.
And this is what Lewis calls the smuggling fallacy. He says we fool ourselves, we think we can imagine many eternal spirits, but we're cheating.
We are absolutely cheating. We're smuggling in a picture of, say, human forms standing in a room. We imagine a heavenly council or a group of ghosts floating in the clouds. But the moment you imagine them standing next to each other,
You've smuggled in space.
you've smuggled in space. You've smuggled in the very universe you were supposed to be doing without.
You're picturing a background, a stage.
Exactly. Try to imagine two distinct minds that have no body, no location, no relationship to time, and they have identical origins and an identical nature.
It's impossible. You can't separate them in your mind.
If you strip away space and you strip away matter, the idea of manyness just sort of, it fades. It becomes just a word with no meaning behind it. And this leads to Lewis's great speculation. And we have to emphasize, as he does, that this is guesswork. He's not stating this as dogma.
Yeah, this is him thinking out loud.
He asks, was space, time, and matter created precisely in order to make manyness possible?
That is a staggering thought. We usually think of the universe as the stage, and we're the actors. The stage is just, there, so we have somewhere to stand. But Lewis is suggesting the universe might be the machinery required to create distinct personalities in the first place.
The theory is that perhaps the only way for God to have many sons, many distinct spirits, is to first make many natural creatures in a physical universe. You put them in different bodies at different times in different places. That separates them. It gives each one a unique history and a unique perspective.
So my me-ness, the fact that I am me and not you, is dependent on the fact that I was born in a specific year, in a specific town, with this specific genetic code, and I occupy this specific chair right now.
And then, once they are separate, once they are individuals, then you spiritualize them. You bring them into the family. You hand them the Christ life, as Lewis puts it.
It's like casting a bronze statue. You need a mold. The physical world is the mold. It separates the molten metal into a specific shape. Without the mold, you just have a puddle of bronze.
That's a perfect analogy.
Oh.
You can't just create the spiritual sons from scratch in the void because they'd all be identical. You have to grow them in the soil of space and time to make them distinct, and then you harvest them, so to speak.
This changes how I look at the physical world. It's not just a temporary holding cell we're waiting to escape from. It is the individuating machine. My body, my location in the 21st century, my specific set of experiences, these aren't accidental details. They're the very things that make me me and not you.
And it gives a tremendous dignity to the physical creation. Think of Gnosticism, that ancient heresy. It taught that the spirit is good and matter is evil. They thought we were souls trapped in these meat suits and we needed to escape.
Right.
Lewis is flipping that completely. He's saying matter might be the necessary tool for creating spiritual distinctiveness. You need the toy soldier stage, the tin soldier, the biological human,
Yeah.
to create the distinct person who can then freely receive the life of God.
So if that critic asks again, why the long way around? Why the biological evolution, the history of the bodies? The answer might be there is no other way. To get a million distinct suns, you have to start with a million distinct creatures in space and time.
It's a fascinating defense of the necessity of creation itself. It suggests that God isn't being inefficient. He's doing the only thing that logically works.
I want to just pause there because that is a lot to digest. We've gone from the critic saying God is slow to realizing God is building a complexity engine called the universe just so he can have a relationship with you specifically.
It makes the personal relationship with God actually personal and meaningful. He doesn't just love humanity in the abstract. He loves you, the specific, unrepeatable result of this specific history.
I want to bridge this to the second note Lewis includes because it feels like a natural progression. It moves from this huge cosmic scale right down to the social scale. So we've established that God uses the physical universe to create distinct individuals, but now, how do those individuals relate to each other?
This is where Lewis tackles the concept of the human race as an organism.
He makes a distinction between a collection and an organism. This is so helpful because I think we often get this completely wrong. We talk about society or the public, but those are really vague terms.
They are. We tend to think of the human race as a club or a crowd, a collection.
Like a bag of marbles, or to stick with our earlier analogy, a stack of pennies.
Right. In a collection, the items are separate. You can add one or take one away, and it doesn't fundamentally change the others. If I lose a penny from my stack, the other pennies don't feel it. They don't change their nature. They're independent units.
But Lewis says Christianity views the human race as something more like a tree or a body, one huge organism.
And this brings us back to that penny analogy, but with a brilliant twist. Lewis says, look at 6 pennies. They are quite separate, but they are very much alike.
They're identical for all intents and purposes.
But now consider my nose and my lungs. They are part of the same body. They share a common life. They're connected by the same blood supply. But they are very, very different.
A nose looks nothing like a lung, and a lung looks nothing like a hand. You couldn't mistake them.
And here is the counterintuitive principle he pulls from that. Things that are parts of a single organism must be different in order to function together. Things that are not parts of an organism, like pennies in a stack, can be identical.
So real unity actually requires difference. If everything is the same, you don't have a body, you have a pile of spare parts. If I have a bag full of eyeballs, that's not a body, that's a horror movie.
That's a great way of putting it. A body requires a nose, an eye, a foot, a liver. They have to be different to be one. And this defines the Christian view of the individual. Christianity doesn't view you as just an item on a list, person number 4,502,000,000. It views you as an organ in a body. You are intended to be different from me because you have a different function. You are meant to contribute something that no one else can.
This is so important for how we view our relationships and, honestly, our politics. Because we are constantly falling into errors here. We seem to bounce between two extremes. We either want everyone to be the same, or we want absolutely nothing to do with anyone else.
And this is where Lewis gives us a brilliant piece of advice on spiritual warfare. He talks about the twin errors.
He identifies two opposites, totalitarianism and individualism. Let's define those first, because these words get thrown around a lot in the news. But Lewis is using them in a very specific philosophical sense.
Totalitarianism in this context is the error of wanting to suppress differences. It's the penny mindset applied to people. It wants everyone to look alike, think alike, and act alike. It forgets that we are supposed to be different organs.
It's the state or the church or the culture saying you must fit this mold exactly. It's the pressure to conform, be another brick in the wall.
Right. It values the whole, but it crushes the parts. And individualism is the opposite error. It's the mindset that says, I am separate. Your troubles are no business of mine. I am an island. My religion is private. My life is my own. It forgets that we belong to the same organism.
So totalitarianism forgets we're different organs. Individualism forgets we're in the same body.
Precisely. And here is the trap. This is the key insight. Lewis warns that the devil sends errors into the world in pairs. He sends them in pairs of opposites.
This is such a great tactical insight. We usually think the devil just tries to sell us evil, but Lewis says he sells us false choices.
He relies on your reaction. He knows you might have a natural, healthy dislike for totalitarianism. You hate the idea of being just a cog in a machine. You want freedom. So he uses that justifiable dislike to push you hard into individualism. He says, see, the collective is bad. So you should just care about yourself. Forget the community. Be a lone wolf.
Or, if you're a person who sees the incredible selfishness of individualism, you see people ignoring the poor, you see people acting with total greed, the devil sidles up to you and says, see, that's terrible. Individual freedom is dangerous. What we need is to force everyone to be the same. We need strict control. And he pushes you toward totalitarianism.
He effectively herds the human race. He encourages us to spend all of our energy and time debating which error is worse. As long as we are fighting about whether totalitarianism is worse than individualism or vice versa, we're distracted. We are playing his game. We are running back and forth on the deck of a sinking ship, arguing about which side is leaking more.
It's like a pendulum. We swing from one extreme to the other, generation after generation, thinking we're correcting the problem, but really we're just trading one error for another. We see this in history all the time, don't we? A generation of extreme collectivism is often followed by a generation of extreme individualism.
And the Christian goal, Lewis says, is not to choose the lesser of two evils. The goal is to go straight through between them. We have no concern with either extreme.
So we need to hold two truths in tension at the same time. You are unique, created for a specific purpose, and that fights totalitarianism. And you are part of a whole deeply responsible for your neighbor, and that fights individualism.
That is the biblical understanding of the covenant community. We are individuals, yes, standing before God on our own 2 feet. But we are also a people. We are a body. We cannot exist without the other parts.
I want to apply this to our daily lives. Lewis mentions how we treat our children or our neighbors. He says, when you find yourself wanting to turn your children or pupils or even your neighbors into people exactly like yourself, remember that God probably never meant them to be that.
That is a real conviction for a lot of us, I think. It's natural to want people to agree with us. We want them to have our tastes, our politics, our specific theological nuances. It feels safer. But if I try to make you into a carbon copy of me, I'm fighting against God's design. I'm trying to turn a lung into a nose because I happen to be a nose, and I think noses are the best kind of organ.
And if you succeed, you've actually damaged a body. A body with 2 noses and no lungs is in big trouble. It can smell everything, but it can't breathe.
Exactly. We should celebrate the fact that our neighbor is different. That difference is not a bug. It is a feature of the design. It's essential for the organism to live.
But then on the flip side, when we're tempted to say, that person's problems are their own fault, it's not my business, we are falling right into the other trap.
We are acting like the hand saying to the foot, I don't need you. You stepped in the mud, you deal with it. But if the foot gets gangrene, the hand is going to die too. We are connected. The spiritual reality of the human race is unity, even if we don't feel it emotionally all the time.
So bringing this all back together, from the cosmic speculation about manyness, all the way down to the practical advice about not being a totalitarian or an individualist, there's a really clear common thread.
The thread is God's intentional design. He doesn't do things haphazardly.
He didn't create toy soldiers because he likes watching us suffer. He created a physical universe because it might be the only logical way to generate distinct sons who can love him freely.
And he doesn't create the human race as just a random collection. He created an organism where our very difference serves our unity.
It reframes everything. My struggles, my physical limitations, my difficult neighbors, none of this is accidental. It is all part of the process of becoming a son and part of the function of the body.
It creates a worldview that is both humble and high at the same time. Humble because I'm just one organ. I'm not the whole show. I'm just a thumb or maybe an eyelash. But also high because I am an organ in the body of Christ. I have a specific, unique role that no one else in history can play. If I don't do my part, the body suffers for it.
That is the definition of dignity, isn't it?
It is. And it guards us against the kind of polarization we see everywhere in the world. The world wants you to pick a side, collectivism or hyper-individualism. The gospel says, no, you are a unique child of God called into a sacrificial community. It cuts right through the middle of that false choice.
And it is so much harder to walk that middle path than to just slide down into one of the ditches on either side.
It's always harder to walk the ridge line. But that's where the view is, and that's where the truth is.
I just want to circle back to that smuggling fallacy one more time before we wrap up. I think it is such a useful tool for you listening, not just for theology, but for thinking in general.
It's a great tool for critical thinking. Whenever you're thinking about spiritual realities, angels, heaven, the nature of God, you have to ask yourself, am I smuggling in space and time without realizing it?
Am I imagining God as just a big man in the sky? Am I imagining heaven as just Earth with fluffier clouds and better lighting?
Lewis is constantly pushing us to strip away those sensory metaphors to get to the logical core of the thing. And when we do that with this manyness problem, we realize how limited our minds are. We realize that time and space are not absolute containers that God sits inside of. They are things he invented, like a painter invents a canvas.
And he invented them for a purpose.
To make you possible.
That is a showstopper of a thought.
It really is.
As we close out, I want to try and synthesize this for you because you might be feeling a bit dizzy from all the metaphysics. We've covered a lot of ground, from the printing press to the North Pole to the physiology of lungs.
There. Let's boil it down to the essentials.
Okay, point one. The pain and struggle of life are largely due to the fall or rebellion. But the physical universe itself, the fact that we're biological creatures in space and time, that is necessary. It isn't a mistake. It is the machine God uses to create distinct individuals.
Right. Without the mold of nature, we would be indistinguishable spiritual blobs. There'd be no you.
Point two. We are not just a collection of individuals like pennies in a jar. We are an organism. We are biologically and spiritually connected.
They're parts of a single body.
And point three, because we are an organism, we must be different. And we should stop trying to force everyone to be the same. That's totalitarianism. But we should also stop pretending we are unconnected. That's individualism.
We have to reject the devil's false choices. We don't pick the lesser of two evils. We walk the path of the body of Christ, which is unity and diversity.
It's deep theology, but it has immediate application for how I look at myself in the mirror and how I look at the person sitting across from me on the bus.
That's the beauty of Lewis. He starts with the Trinity, and he ends with how to treat your neighbor. He shows that your ethics are completely driven by your metaphysics. What you really believe about God changes how you treat people.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on this week. We talked about Lewis's speculation that space and matter might exist solely to allow you to be distinct from God and from your neighbor.
A tentative guess, as he says, but a powerful one.
If that is true, or even close to true, then your physical body, your height, your age, your location, your gender, even your physical limitations, they aren't just temporary vessels or accidental cages. They are the very definition of your unique selfhood. They are the tools God used to carve you out of the block of potentiality.
That's right. You are not a ghost trapped in a machine. You are a person being forged.
So what does that mean for how you treat your physical life today? If your body is the very mechanism of your uniqueness, maybe we should stop resenting it and start seeing it as the gift that makes us possible.
And seeing our neighbor's body and their situation with that same reverence, they are being forged too.
Exactly. Thank you for diving deep with us today. This was a workout, but a good one.
A pleasure as always.
Keep thinking, keep reading, and we will see you on the next deep dive.